Good afternoon, and welcome to the Virtual Lab webinar. Weekly, every week, 12:30, no longer than 30 minutes. I'll quickly go over the rules. You'll find us on Facebook, you'll find us on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Click like and share. Feedback always welcome, and fire in as many of your questions for our guest today, Keven, who I'll introduce in a moment. Looking forward to next week as well. We've got Pascal Burnett joining us, and so that should be a really interesting one on innovation and R&D. So everyone hopefully knows me by now. Dave Cummins. I'll hand over to Mike quickly to introduce himself.
Hi, Mike, responsible for managed services and drone operations in the UK.
So this week, an esteemed guest, we're bringing on Keven Gambold, one of my original bosses. Thankful for making me the man I am. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No. I'm getting hate mail already.
No comment.
Yeah, exactly. Kev, over to you. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, welcome. Pleased to be here. Kev Gambold. I'm out on the east coast of the US right now, just outside DC in Northern Virginia. I was a British Royal Air Force pilot back in the day. I have to say that now because I'm in America. Nobody knows where the Royal Air Force is based. Unfortunately, after an illustrious 20-odd years, I ended up working with Dave and had to subsequently retire. The two may not be connected, but temporarily they're pretty close. So I've been over in the US now for about 10 years with my American family, and we started a company called Unmanned Experts, in which Dave graced us with his presence for a couple of years before he realized he could do better himself. And he has done, well done. So so I'm here to talk about Unmanned Experts, the American market, small UAS, and how it looks.
Yeah,
well,
for me, it was interesting to get you on. I think you were one of the originals. Before the Sky Futures of this world popped up, Unmanned Experts was there. And again, it stole me from the Air Force to come out and work. So you have seen more of a transition. A lot of UAV operators now, they talk about the last couple of years and what's coming. And everyone is the creator of the great new future. You know, this time in 3 years, I will have fixed the issues. You've obviously been around 10 years, so you've seen at least 3-4 sets of individials stating they're going to fix.
I've created more of those issues now than I have fixed, and I'm over the moon about it. No, you're right. It was 2010 when we got out. Now, if you think American small UAS services were not strictly legal until 2013. You know, there was a very thin regulation called a 333 exemption. So 2016 was the first time we actually got our own rule to do commercial operations called Part 107. So, you know, we're 6 years ahead of the market, which is, anyone will tell you, just plain stupid. Don't do that. But we didn't start as a small US company. I mean, myself, if you remember a chap called Paul Rolfe and Tiger Meadows, all retired from Royal Air Force about the same time. We'd all been on the Pred Reaper programs, and Tiger went off to Australia, Rolfe went back to the UK, and I came to the States. So we started Unmanned Experts as 3 separate companies: UK, PLC in Australia, and LLC over here. And that was the format. And we ran that with Dave in the UK for, what was it, probably 5-6 years. In theory, on paper, that still exists. But we actually moved the headquarters, who was the CEO and who was the the COO. That changed, monthly, depending on where the biggest contract was. So and it amazes me, honestly amazes me, where I dig out some old file and I'm like, holy smokes. Or I'm looking through the thing and I find flyers for things that we were doing in a conference I forgot we'd ever been to.
Yeah. And
all of that stuff, we went through the whole remit for, we incorporated, we got investors, we went through all of that. The biggest drama was changing the goddamn logo.
We've got that ourselves recently.
Exactly. So we've seen several iterations of churn, and we had, so the UK kind of died off. The PLC Australia is still around in theory, but the US one, we've gone through a couple of complete cycles, and at the moment we're coming out of one where we very nearly went under. I mean, it was a pretty ugly time in about probably late 2016. So we managed to keep ourselves afloat, and now we're on the up and up. But it was.
What are you doing now? What's UMX focusing on?
So UTM is the main thing, unmanned traffic management. And part of the reason for that is that we had spent a lot of time. Consultancy is telling people, what you know and they don't. And if you do that repeatedly, you're actually teaching. So we went from consultancy to training. And we had this large, training event. We had a lot of online, a lot of in-residence training. And that, that morphed with, it was large stuff through to, ConOps, through to ISR, and then it got into the small stuff, and then the Part 107, the PIFCO or whatever the equivalent is this week over there. And so we had all of that training piece, and that was part of the thing. And then we got into this managed services, and it became new and interesting, and I couldn't decide where we wanted to be. We started off in industrial kicker. It's called critical infrastructure key resource inspection. So looking at maybe power stations and some power lines, etc. We got into a few of the early programs there. We got into bridges. We were some of the first people to do any bridge inspections in the US. Of the EPRI team, EPRI is the Electrical Power Research Institute. They're the ones, the central body does all the research for all of the power companies in the US. Of the 4 teams that were flying on their live fly demo in about 2015, we were 2 of them. So we were right there when it all happened. It was just, there you go, great idea. We're backed by investors' money. We had enormously expensive, very fancy airplanes, great ConOps, lots of books, all the safety stuff, nobody paying for it.
So we'll come back to equipment, and we're going to definitely come back to managed service. But UTM, as the educator, tell me, I was told in 2010 it was going to be fixed by 2013. So what's the state?
Oh yeah, is it not fixed over there?
No.
I think it was a typo. I think they said 2030 because it's been appalling. And just like many of these programs. So it was a NASA-led program, started in 2012, I think. 5 years it was. We flew for the first 3 years, went through, I think it's 4 technology capability level TCLs. And ultimately, I wanted to can the program from the get-go. It was a sideline for us. One of the guys was interested. We wrote our own software. We flew but I paid taxes, and taxes pay for NASA. NASA ran the program, and they made me pay to fly on their program. So I was paying for it twice. I was going to rename it Kev's bloody program for drones flying around at low level. They didn't go for that. Anyway, so ultimately, as expected, they then farmed it out to our test sites. We started a whole load of test sites here to try and make some money. That just didn't work for them either. But and then they gave it to the FAA last year, and the FAA went, okay, 5 years of testing, lots of nice concepts of operations, some different waveforms that we can look at. Brilliant. And that's it. They haven't done anything. They haven't done a damn thing with it. And it's probably they've started now a new program called Remote ID, which is basically, a number plate for drones and supposedly your registration. So people could, as you fly down the street, they go, that one is, that's Billy Bob's drone FX427, and it's dropping packages for Mrs. Miggins. All right, that's the remote ID. Should have been part of UTM. It wasn't, because these guys are idiots. And so that's starting. They're using that as an excuse to delay the whole thing 5 years.
Yeah.
But we luckily we got in on a side program where we invented a side program called UTM, a deployable UTM. So UTM, in its infinite wisdom, is based on beaming your current drone's position and where it wants to go and what it wants to do and how it wants to talk to people into the net, into the internet. And if you want to deconflict, you have to do it on the net. Yeah. And that's great if you have connectivity, 4G, 5G, whatever. But if you are, in our case, wildland firefighters, that's who we're doing most of the program through the US Department of Agriculture, who take care of the West burning down every year, what do you do when there's no connectivity? What do you do when Hurricane Michelle completely annihilates the LTE system. What do you do? And our program is all about taking a box, a mesh network of radios, and having all of those capabilities out in the middle of nowhere.
Brilliant. We've been actually working with Horizon from Thales here, who are doing similar UTM. I mean, the problem for me, the only way that the UTM works is you take the entire book, you rip it up, and you start again. But no one's ever been willing to do that. And I think if we'd done that, we'd have finished this 3 years ago, as opposed to let's create for the listeners who maybe don't know, but this is all about integrating drones, which will happen at some point, into the airspace so that people don't care where we fly and allow us to fly everywhere. Okay, so let's talk equipment. You mentioned some aircraft that we actually have. Where did you start with then? I mean, obviously, we go back to our Predator days. When I was a manned aircraft pilot, I used to laugh at drone pilots. I became a drone pilot. I then laughed at small VTOL pilots, and now I've got small VTOLs, so I don't quite know what's going on. But tell me what kit you bought first. What's the difference between your kit then and now, if you're using any?
Well. So high and low end, basically. So when we first really went to buy kit, I mean, we used to hire people with their own kit back in the day. I mean, DJI didn't really exist, or it existed, but it made things like an S800, which was pretty much a wire it together yourself. Looks like a ball of chalk, very Heath Robinson. So those are the guys that we initially had. And those are the drones we initially had. It was basically bring your own drone if you want to get a job at UMEX. And then we got investors, and we went, right, we're going to get super fancy here. We're doing, we need, if you want to do bridge inspections, the key about bridges is they suck when it comes to drones. The weather always sucks. They're massive metal structures. There's no GPS underneath them. They are ferrous magnet nightmares, and the wind around any large elevated structure is lethal. And not only that, your camera is not on top, so you need a very unique bird. And we ended up going for what was called an Ariane Sky Ranger at the time. That just come out. They cost about £100,000 each, and if you then wanted to buy like extra legs and a camera, 150 grand. Probably. So that's what we got. We got a couple of those. We became a reseller for them. I think we sold one, and that was the Void. And it was actually flown by a tablet, which was even more unique. But they weren't ideal for some of the programs we were looking at, so we ended up going for some of the early DJI pieces. So I think we looked at a 600 when they first came out. We had our training package had all the Phantom 2s and 3s. But then we got out of managed services. It was just not, we were all things to all people. And I think we mentioned earlier prior that renting became en vogue. I mean, if we're based out of Colorado, if we're doing a job in North Carolina, you got to get on board a plane. Nobody understands what the battery rules are on the plane. We're the only people that do, but they still throw the batteries off. So, you can get where you're going. You mention to somebody that you're carrying a drone and they think you're going to shove it down the intake, even though it's in the goddamn hold. So it was always very difficult. So this rental thing is, we've done it once or twice and it was superb. It really was.
Mike, maybe you can sort of talk through our transition. It's actually very, very similar.
Yeah, I mean, we I think went down a similar route to you, Kevin. We've got a shelf full of kit, some of which is redundant and doesn't get used anymore. The two Sky Rangers being a prime example. Got a couple of F8s, one of which is in bits, but that's another story.
We used one of those for quite a lot. They were amazing at the time. So
great pieces of kit, rubbish battery life, but the payloads on them are fantastic. And we still wheel it out from time to time, but we quickly realized a couple of years ago that the model of purchasing equipment was just ludicrous, especially at the rate at which DJI, who had almost morphed into the Apple of drones, were churning out new equipment every year in fancy packaging. And it became apparent that the way to do it was to rent. And fortunately for us, as a company in the northeast of England, Heli Guy, who we had purchased some kit from previously, They developed a rental program that fits in with our needs perfectly, not only on a sort of year-to-year basis, but for short-term rentals. It's ideal. We need something, we have it in stock, it arrives next day, we use it, we fly it. They come and pick it up.
That's payloads as well?
Yeah, payloads, tethers, ground-based tethers, battery components, you name it. It works a treat.
No, it is. And it wasn't even just the convenience, I think. DJI, again, you would laugh at DJI 7, 8 years ago, certainly from an enterprise perspective. But I remember looking at the first 210 as an example when they rolled out, and the quality of the image, the stability of the aircraft, how neat and tidy it was. Again, you try and pull a Skyranger up a flight of stairs on an oil and gas platform versus something like the 210, and you start to realize DJI they had done everything right.
No, it goes to show that when you got a successful business model with a lot of money coming in, maybe from whatever sources, you are focused, and they're clearly. I mean, what amazed me when we got our 210, and we actually got it for a V2V program, vehicle to vehicle program, which is part of our next thing, is I was looking at what payload to get, and I just couldn't believe the supposedly cinematic quality and the options and the cost of those payloads. And I'd always said that, a drone is a payload truck, and it doesn't matter what the drone is, it's all about what it's carrying. But I couldn't believe the standard, the quality that DJI had put into those, like an X7 or something. It's eye-watering what it can do.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you sit that next to 150 grand worth of Skyranger, and there's no competition.
Chalk and cheese. Chalk and cheese.
What about China and the Americans? I mean, you hear a lot of the rumors of operating things like DJIs. Is that still a problem?
Yeah, it's still a problem. So depending on what month it is, the Department of the Army or the Interior or somebody will roll out and say, don't use DJI drones, or don't. And of course, the difficulty is that there was one sort of mass-produced small UAS company called 3DR. They used to make the Solo. And we have a couple of those because they're pretty good R&D platforms. And you use Mavlink, which is pretty easy to crack. So but they were made in Mexico and they went bust. So you can pick them up pretty cheap left and right. And now there are a lot more programs like Parrot is over here with the Anafi. That's pretty handy. So that's a low end, much smaller, like almost a micro. Skydio are doing amazing work with one of their micros. But anything that you want to compare with a 210 or a 300, the DJI, slim pickings, really. I mean, they're very unique platforms, and none of them have bells and whistles.
Are you seeing much fixed wing?
So we bought what did we have? Oh, we had an Altavian, which I'm not kidding. It came in a coffin. It weighed a flipping ton, and it took like an hour and a half to set it up, and we flew it once or twice. And then the next year, we were like, hey, we should get this updated. And they went, yeah, that autopilot is so old. We don't. And so I'm not kidding. We just boxed it up and sent it back to our investors. They're like, here you go. We don't want it. It was a disaster. So we have a training fixed wing, but we don't. We just haven't seen it. In fact, interesting enough, a couple of years ago, I did a potato field mapping program up in Wisconsin. And the concept was very clever, but you had to map the fields in EO and IR, well, mostly in IR and near infrared. And then you had to take photos of the field. So we had high definition photo drones. They were DJI 600s with amazing RGB cameras, and they were flying along at like 100 feet, taking super high def photos of, the plants to see if there's any bugs on them. And then we had fixed wings doing the stuff at 400 feet. And the fixed wings kept crashing, and the camera work was crap. And of course, they fly by, and then they do this massive U-turn into the wind. And so the data that we were getting, terabytes of data for each field, and it's taking 72 hours to process it. And then we crashed them all, basically. We're like, what are we going to do? So we took the 600s and we flew them at 300 feet with the same, like a multispectral. Yeah. And they don't go beyond the field. So the data was about a third of what it was. It was just as fast. The battery lasted as good. It was amazing. Everyone's literally, after 2 weeks of banging our heads against walls, were like, this is the answer. And so, yeah, they did, fixed wings, I'm struggling with their utility in what I do, which is the BV loss regulations are so inane that, you just can't, you've got to be keeping an eye on it, or you have one guy you can daisy chain to. There's just no.
Well, that's a good thing. So let's talk regulations, and I guess the difference between UK and America. I'm intrigued to see where we are now and where we're going in the next 6 months. I mean, Mike, maybe you can start. Obviously, there's a lot of changes happening here in the UK.
Yeah, well, in theory, it still looks like it's going to be the 31st of December, but it's already been pushed once with the introduction of the EASA regulations, ironically, on the same day that we leave the European Union. It's an interesting concept. But, yeah, I mean, the regulations here, I guess, have been fairly static, other than a change of name from whatever it used to be called, PFAW to the PIFCO. The requirements to meet that have broadly been the same, and then with the introduction of operating safety cases. But the rule changes, I think, are going to fuel another change in the market. In the last 5 years that I've been involved in it, everybody seemed to jump into drones, and everybody was going to be the next filmmaker or produce amazing pictures. But unless you have an eye for it, you just give up. There's no point. I quickly learned that. I thought, I can't take a decent drone picture to save myself. But, inspect a building and take boring, repetitive shots time and time again, no problem. So people thought, well, if I can't fly drones, what am I going to do next? And then everybody became an NQE. And then we went from 6 NQEs to 30 NQEs, and the market got flooded. And then some of the NQEs thought, well, I'm not making any money anymore. What am I going to do now? And they decided, I know, I'll write operations manuals. So they've moved into that field. So we've got this situation in the 1st of January where anybody without any training or any qualification from the CAA will be able to fly a drone up to, is it 250 grams, I think, and go and do commercial work. So you can walk into the shop, pick up a
250 grams?
Yep. You can go and pick up a Mavic Mini, walk out the shop, charge up the battery, and you can then go and do commercial work. But again, as we talked about previously, I think where the separation between the good and the bad is going to be is what you do with that data afterwards. And that's going to separate the good guys from the bad guys. If you're just capturing data and handing it over to somebody, you're not going to last very long. Nobody just wants data. They want a deliverable. They want a product that they can use and tie in with whatever it is they want to achieve. And again, moving on from that weight limit up to, I think it's about a kilo or so. There's an entry level qualification which achieve that, and you can go and fly commercially. You can also fly in congested areas, providing you travel at no more than, I think it's 5 meters per second, etc. And you can fly to
6 meters per second. All the dynamics change.
Yeah, exactly. The risk is.
And when it gets dark as well, the wind's the wrong color.
So there's that. So there's going to be all these people hitting the market at the beginning of next year to do commercial work, and it'll last for a while. There will be crashes. There'll be high-profile cases where people are doing crazy things and getting caught. But I think for the serious operators, they will plug away. They'll carry on doing what they're doing. The key thing is that I know from our own experience that our clients, our biggest clients, understand the difference between us and a one-man band who's maybe doing it on a part-time basis. He has his PFCO. He might even have an OSC, but they understand the work and effort and expertise that sits behind a company like this. And that will differentiate us and other big players.
My question is, how long before those clients of yours take it in-house? Because it's such a low bar to entry on, Jack's cousin has a Mavic Mini, and is a commercial operator. Yeah, we've got it. We've got the pretty pictures, and then we got some software. Ultimately, that's what we saw. Is a lot of police departments and sheriffs, etc., who we were trying to service with, like a timeshare system on Aryan Scouts and Aryan Sky Rangers, and they just took it all in house. And so,
I think you're right. We saw that here, but we also have since a bit of a reverse. Power line companies were probably the key, and police forces here. I think one police force crashed 5 Sky Rangers in a month, and I think they just realised very quickly you can do it. I mean, you can get this. Mike can get a drone airborne. That's the easy part, but as you say, making it usable, I think, is very different. And again, we've not to talk about ourselves too much, but we've morphed away from so much the capturing of the data. For us now, it's more about what you do with the data. And again, that could be an in-house for these companies, but I think a lot of them still.
I literally, we sold off our training division, and then I got cornered to do an online training course for the solar market, a company called HeatSpring. So I spent most of the spring doing more and more of me nattering away at a camera. But so it's all online, and half of it is the Part 107, which is the PIFO equivalent, and it is a commercial license up to 25 pounds. 25 pounds? No, 55 pounds, 25 kilos. And all you need to do is pass an online test. No flight test. No, you can be a commercial operator in the US with a 50 pound ball of, spinning, whirling blades and death, having just done a PowerPoint brief and never seen a drone in your life. And it took the FAA 9 goddamn years to write that regulation. NASA got to the moon in less time. Anyway, so, but apart from that, the second half of the course is all about, and I built it around a thing called the DIKW triangle, the DIKW, so data, information, knowledge, wisdom. And that's what you're talking about, which is how do you take all of these goddamn pictures and make it to your left strut of your, $17 billion construction project is about to collapse next year because of this. So and that's what you guys were onto. And, we had a system, we were building towards that in the rail bridge sector, in fact, but the market didn't pick up. I mean, these bridges, the inspectors for the bridges are 100 years old. The bridges are 100 years old, and neither of them want anything to do with the new technology that puts them out of business. So it's interesting, the human element of it, to get into these sort of markets.
Kev, we've got 2 minutes left, and we can't have the original drone consultant on without asking for a bit of free consultancy. So what's coming around the corner? What's next?
I know. Me. So here you go. It's AAM. It's Advanced Air Management. God, I should even know. It used to be called UAM, Urban Air Mobility. And now it's Advanced Air Mobility. And basically, that's what's going to happen. In fact, we're on a couple of programs for it for NASA now. And it is, instead of us just worrying about drones flying around and the UTM program and delivering pizzas and getting Amazon, boxes and your sonic screwdrivers, it is going to be combining those with the Uber Air and the unmanned taxis, and then, dropping off your new car and all this, all your float, all the Jetsons kind of stuff. That is the program that is going to get UTM into your neighborhood. That is it. So invest in AAM, send money to the address you'll see at the end here. And and if you have any more questions, then ask Dave, because he's always been slightly brighter than me. Not a lot, but a little. Enough. There you go. Free advice.
Line there. That's where we should just wrap up. Kev, it's been too long. We'll have to have a beer as well sometime in the future. But thanks for coming on.
I still do that. Yep.
Good.
In fact, you don't even know what's in this mug. But
yeah. I think COVID's done that for all of us. Don't worry. Stay great.
Well, lovely to meet you, Mike.
Pardon?
Lovely to meet you, Mike.
Yep, you too.
So I have to work with Dave.
Exactly.
That's why I'm going great.
12:30 will be the next webinar. Thanks very much. And again, like, share, and feedback and comments. Thanks very much, and good day.